All right, people, today I'm going to talk about how to get rid of toxic partners in your life. Specifically, if you have a long term relationship with somebody that maybe you got into a relationship and you never should have, um, and how to get them out of your life, especially when you have kids together or the situation is complicated and you can't just pull out and leave at the drop of a hat. You have to be a little bit more strategic about it. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. um to preface this, like, I'm assuming you've already given them all the opportunities to change and they just haven't changed, right? I mean, there's a certain point where you've tried explaining, you've tried being nice, you've tried open communication, you've tried talking to their mom, you've tried um, responding, the same way that they talk to you, you've tried forgiving, being nice, being assertive, you've tried every technique in the world, and they're just stubborn and they make it very obvious that they're not interested in growing or changing or having a healthy relationship, and they just want to remain toxic, and you can deal with that however you want. That's the type of thing I'm talking about, right? So um just keep in mind when you're going through this that everything you've tried has failed so far, right? So it's not like you're gonna come on some new method and they're gonna change. It's been years, you've tried everything. um Maybe you've tried counseling, you've tried praying, you've tried open communication, you've tried being earnest. I mean, they're just toxic, right? And they're not even open to real communication, right? So what do? Especially when you have kids together, or you have assets, or you have family, or the situation is very complicated. How do you get out of this type of thing, right? So there does come a time to change. Um, and let me just get into, a lot of people stay in this type of relationship and they stay in this type of dynamic, and that just becomes their new life. And they kind of live a nightmare until the rest of their days, and nothing ever changes and nothing ever gets better because the other person doesn't want to change. You can't force somebody to change, right? You can make changes on yourself, and that's where your power is, right? But you can't, with all the power in the world, if somebody doesn't want to, they're not going to change. I mean, like, people like if you're in a war and you're trying to get somebody to do something, like, some people are so stubborn, you can like cut off their fingers and toes and torture them and do everything and they're not going to change. So what chance do you have that you think your honest communication is going to help with maybe a narcissist or somebody who's just has bad morals and ethics and just doesn't really care about you know being healthy in a healthy relationship? What do, right? So obviously, the first hard step is to accept that they're not going to change, and that's the hard part because you're always hanging on to hope. Maybe it's been years and you're kind of been thinking, maybe they'll change, give them another chance. You know, after like 700, 800, 900, 10,000 tries, they're still doing the same type of thing and they're not showing any desire to improve on their behavior. There's a point in time where you need to draw the line and say, you know what, this isn't working out, and what are we going to do moving forward, right? So I'm not saying you have to leave the person. In fact, leaving the person or the situation immediately is probably a bad idea, because if you just cut it off, you leave your, especially if you have kids involved, you're leaving yourself in a very bad situation because they're going to manipulate the narration, say you abandoned the family, so you left for no reason, blah 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 blah, right? And it just leaves you in a bad position in general, especially with, if you're a man, with family court, you're not going to probably get access to your kids that much, and the whole thing gets really complicated. So, one of the first things you can do before you actually leave the situation, before you actually are done completely, because that's going to take some time. It might take years. It might take 5 years. It might take 10 years for you to completely pull out. But you've got to be going in the right direction. It's kind of like when I was like, when I stopped drinking, I didn't just go cold turkey. Some people do, and great, more power to them. But I just realized it wasn't going to be a long-term lifestyle for me unless I could do it gradually. So I cut off, drinking like a quarter of what I was drinking, and then I cut off half of what I was drinking, and then I cut off 75% of what I was drinking, until I got to the point where I felt like I was in control of my drinking, and I could drink whether I wanted to or not. And today, I mean, I don't drink hardly much at all, so I'm pretty much sober, and that's the way I like it. It's not always easy, but long term it's the better thing. So the main thing you can do is stop investing your time, your energy, your money, and your emotional energy, and just your emotional being into these people. I mean, these people, living with them sucks the energy out of your life. Whether it is just the way that they disrespect you, the way that there's no communication, the way that they have their toxic, personality traits and whatnot, you need to just basically pull out of there as much as you can. So that means just cutting out as much time and as much energy and as much emotional investment as you can. I'm going to make more videos about this in the future, because there are strategies involved in doing that, and it's not always easy, especially with manipulative and emotional manipulation, which I'll talk about in another video as well. But the biggest thing you can do in the immediate right now is, you're probably not going to just pull out and stop, communicating. If you don't have kids with this person, and if you're not in a bad position legally or personally, then yeah, just cut them off and say see ya and go find somebody better, But in a lot of these situations, we have kids together with these people. We have maybe, shared assets. We have relationships, family. I mean, it gets complicated. So how do you get out of that, right? So just gradually decrease the time, decrease the energy, your money, emotions, and try to find a place to live. If you're living with this person, I think the first step is to find another place to live, whether it's your own place or it's elsewhere with family or whatever the situation might be. You don't need to go and live by cut them out of your life completely, but you need to start living away from them more regularly, whether it's 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, until it just becomes kind of like a thing like, hey, we're not living together anymore, right? So now what, right? And you have to be careful within the legal system about how you do this. I'll talk about this more in detail probably in other videos, but we're talking about kids involved, right? And if you're married, things can get a little bit more, paperwork and lawyers and whatnot, right? So I'll talk about that. I've been through that as well. So, but it will. So one of the main things to consider when you start doing this is going to require sacrifice, right? Especially if you have kids together with this person, right? One of the big sacrifices is you're probably not going to see your kids as much, right? And that's painful and that's hard, and it's not ideal. And that's a serious, if you're like me, you love your kids to death. They're one of the only things in my life that mean anything to me, and they mean the world to me. They're one of the main reasons why I take anything seriously in my life, right? So, just keep in mind when you do this that it's going to require sacrifice, and one of the big sacrifices is you're not going to probably see your kids as much. And if you're like me, I'm living in France here. The legal system for fathers is terrible. It's a bad situation. So you're probably going to see your kids maybe, 4 days per month, maybe more, but it's probably going to be every 2 weekends, something like that. Might be a little bit more, depends on your lawyer, your situation, and how far you can go with that. But the legal system in general isn't going to be very supportive for you as a man, right? So as a man, unfortunately, the legal system is set up where if you have kids with somebody who's like a toxic person, and the relationship just isn't working out for you and you pull away, you are the one who's going to suffer the most, as far as not seeing the kids, right? And having less say so in their life. But in a way, you'll have more say so because when they come and visit you, it'll be at your place under your terms. And so that's very good because your kids can see that there's a non toxic way of life. They can see that real communication can exist. They can see that there's another way than just the way that their mom has always done things, right? But you have to accept that they're going to be living with their mom a lot of the time and you're going to have a lot of alone time and you're probably not going to be in their lives as much. So that's a hard hit to take. But if you realize that everybody's life is kind of going to be ruined if you stay in the relationship because the environment is going to stay toxic, the relationship between the parents is going to be terrible, and even the kids are going to suffer indirectly, just because the parents are just kind of coexisting together, like kind of in a very toxic stew, and that just becomes everyday life. The kids are not going to know anything else, and they're going to think that that's just how life is, right? And what does that say for the relationships that they're likely to have when they get older, right? That's obviously not something we want for them, and I really believe that we should try to live as an example, to our kids as to what type of relationship they're going to have, they're going to end up with. We don't want them to be miserable living with a toxic partner, and so we kind of need to show them that it's not acceptable, right? And make the sacrifices necessary. But okay, so the overall goal is to gradually make it easier for everybody to adapt. And this includes the toxic partner. So you're pulling back, you're being more independent, you're making your own decisions, you're being more assertive, you're seeing your kids less, you're living apart, you've drastically minimized the time, energy, emotions, money that you're investing in the toxic partner and parent, right? But you've done it gradually and you've done it a little bit strategically, right? And I'll talk about more about how to do this. But if you do this gradually, it's like slowly peeling off a band-aid. You don't really feel it. It hurts minimally. It hurts for a long time, but it's not as painful, right? And everybody can adapt to it a little bit more. Also, if you pull back gradually like this, you can still kind of tiptoe, come back into your kid's life. You can, come back and see them so that the fact that you're not away, that you're not with them that much is less painful because you're coming back occasionally, you're staggering it, you're being a little bit more strategic about how you're pulling away. But, your kids are going to be affected, and it's not always going to be a pretty picture. The long term, I think, is better. But short term, it's going to be a painful process for everybody. But one of the reasons why I think the best way to do this is gradually is because also the toxic partner, they can kind of adapt to the new reality as well. They can start managing their finances better, managing their time better, managing their transport better if they're dependent on you for transport, which is the case for me. Managing their emotions better, they can start talking to other people, behind your back. They think they're playing the game or whatever. In reality, you're just pulling back and you're trying to give them the freedom to live their life. I always try to call my toxic ex-partner, so that she knows when I'm coming, so that if there's like another man at the house, or if she's trying to set up some type of love triangle or side piece or whatever, that she can't say, "Oh, I didn't know you were coming. Now Mr. So and so is here and the kids love him and blah blah blah." I always send a message so that even if there is a man or there is somebody who's there creating this strange environment where I'm supposed to get jealous or something, at least like she knew I was coming, I knew that she was coming, so that if she says, "Oh yeah, she can't say like this guy was here randomly, with and she didn't know I was coming." So it sets up this dynamic where if I come and there's another man there, then it's like that's what she wanted, and there's no like rewriting of the narrative of me being jealous or whatever. It's just there's another man there, and now she can kind of write that however she wants, and as far as the narrative is concerned, but it just sets up more stable structure, right? So, and that's kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about is the need to create real structure, right? You obviously need structure emotionally because you're going to see your kids probably a lot less, or you're going to have a lot less say on how they're brought up, how often they see you, etc., etc., etc. And that can be complicated, and you're setting up structure so everybody knows that you're coming maybe the weekends. You always send a message beforehand. Maybe it's always the same day that you come by to visit. Maybe it's on Wednesdays and Saturdays that ask if the kids can come over and stay at your house while you're trying to get you know a legal structure set in place, because these things aren't immediate, at least not in France. It takes a lot of time. It takes like a year. So for a year, you're in like limbo land where you have no real legal rights to your kids. So you kind of have to negotiate with that with a toxic ex-partner. You might kind of not really be officially separate from them, but you're not really together either. It's kind of like this strange limbo land where there's like the opportunity for transition. But the main thing to keep in mind during this time is, as you're pulling back, you're never expecting your toxic ex-partner to change, right? And that's one thing, is you should never hold on to the hope that they're going to change. Always put in your head that you have tried 10 years, given this person every opportunity. Now it's too late. And now this is the new reality. The new reality is you're pulling back, and this is the new life that you want. You're going to create structure, security, and comfort on yourself, whether you're living. The wash machine is going back on for some reason. Whether you're living in, as a bachelor or whatever. I even forgot what I was saying. That wash machine is like scaring me, but you want to create structure. And when I say create structure, I'm talking about like legal structure. You need to create legal structure. You need to create visitation structure for your kids, so they know they're going to see you regularly, and leaving them open to knowing that they're going to see you regularly. Sorry, I just had a thought for something else, but so the main thing is you want the structure to be available for them, right? So sorry, I forgot what I was gonna say. So yeah, basically creating structure. So when I was talking about creating structure, I was talking about you want to create a legal structure so that when you're gonna have your kids. A lot of people, they create emotional structure. An emotional structure looks like you're not going to negotiate with the toxic partner. You're not going to talk about relationship type things. You're just going to talk about the kids, right? Emotional structure looks like you've accepted that your toxic partner is not going to change, that you've accepted that this relationship is not going to work out for you. You've accepted that you're gradually going to pull apart and try to create something better for yourself. Emotional structure looks like no matter what your toxic ex-partner does to try to get a reaction out of you, or try to manipulate you back into the couple, or try to guilt trip you, say that you abandoned the family, whatever it is, emotional structure looks like that you basically just reply in neutral ways, that you don't put yourself in bad situations. You see, a toxic partner, they're always looking for a reaction from you. They're trying to they want to emotionally hook you. If they can make you angry or attached, or if they can make you guilty by, telling you what a bad guy you are or whatever, then they've hooked you emotionally. So the thing is anytime you go into communication with the person, you just want to put in your head, anytime you're in their presence, if you're going to be proximal with them, if you're going to be physical, if there's still going to be intimacy, basically you can tell yourself something like, I allow physical closeness but not emotional openness, right? So that way you can kind of gradually pull apart. Things are still a little bit clicky and strange, but you're not allowing yourself to get hooked emotionally. So you're just very neutral and not really open, right? And the main thing is being neutral, because the toxic partner is going to be very manipulative, very controlling, and very experienced at that. So you need to just, if they're trying to make you angry, and maybe they have succeeded in making you angry, change the subject, leave, whatever it is, and just pretend that nothing affects you, right? And you're just be, and if you have to go home and be in a terrible state of mind or whatever, that's fine. But when you go back, you're neutral. Nothing's good, nothing's bad. You don't care. You're neutral, right? But you need to create the legal structure, because emotional structure isn't enough if you're not protected legally, structurally, with your rights to see your kids, right? And that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they try to protect themselves emotionally without setting up that structural protection. And the main thing is you want to set up the structure, the legal structure, before you completely pull out, right, of the relationship or whatever, right? Because if you're with a toxic ex-partner, if you leave them completely, this person is very likely oftentimes narcissistic, so they have what's called narcissistic injury, right? You can look that up, learn a little bit about it. But you don't want to trigger that narcissistic injury, right? So you're going to kind of have to stay in leeway land for a little bit. But ultimately what you're trying to do is just create a legal structure where you are protected legally for your kids. And then once that structure is in place, then you can completely live your own life and pull away. And even if your, ex-partner is a narcissist and they experience narcissistic injury, they can do a lot of damage. So we want to minimize that as much as possible, of course. But the main thing is you have that structure already in place before you've pulled away and before they experience the narcissistic injury, right? So you want to pull away after you have your visitation rights, your legal rights, so that if you don't get your kids back, that you can just go to the police, file a police report. And here in France, the system is so I'm not gonna say so terribly bad that even with legal structure in place, there's a lot of manipulation being done by the mothers these days. But you're going to be a lot more protected, and she's going to be a lot more hesitant to manipulate that if you have the structure set in place. So structure first, legal structure first, and then final pullback after, right? And that's when, once you have that structure in place, that's when you can kind of be more open about if you're dating other people. You can be a little bit more, just be like, hey, I don't give a what you think. This is what I'm doing, and the kids are with me next week anyway, so you can live your own life, right? So that's that. So to end this video, the conclusion is that this is hard for everybody, not just you, right? But it's going to be hardest on you. Why? Because if you're in a Western country, the United States, probably, France, definitely. If you're in a lot of these Western countries, around the world, as a man, it's called the tender years doctrine. If you haven't heard of this, the tender years doctrine is something put into place in the late 1900s, where the custody was transferred from the father to the mother, right? So now men are in a bad position where they see their kids much less than mothers do, right? When the parents are separate, right? And that's just the reality. As individuals, we don't have much control over that. Maybe as a group, as men, over time, if we can put something together, we might figure that out. But for the time being, on the individual level, there's not much we can do. We're gonna see our kids a lot less, right? Main thing is, when we see our kids, we're gonna see them on our terms, and it's gonna be much more healthy, much more agreeable. The kids are gonna love seeing you. You're gonna love seeing them, and great. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not saying it's ideal. I'm not saying this is what we want, right? I'm just saying everything else has failed failed with your toxic ex-partner. They're not gonna change. You don't want to die like that. You don't want to live another 10, 20, 30, 40 years stuck with this person, right? Because they're not just ruining your life. They're probably ruining your career, your energy, your time, to an extent, your self-worth, because they're probably putting you down and whatnot, your vision of yourself, everything, all right? Just the environment where you live, just your house, like, they're probably loud and probably just dictating the environment, and trust me, that is not a way to live. So I'm not saying this is like a good situation to be in, but what's the alternative, right? It's going to be hard on everybody. It's going to be hard on you, and it's going to be hardest on you because you're not going to be seeing your kids that much. So the reality is you're going to have a lot of free time by yourself. You're going to be isolated. This transition is a tough transition because you can't really openly date new people. You can't, go and talk to some woman and be like, yeah, I don't have kids, and my life is perfect. And no, you have to be, you live in reality. You are now 30, 40, 50 years old. You've got kids. Your kids, you see them occasionally. It's tough, and you've got your work and your finances, and life is not easy, and you're going to have a lot of time by yourself. You're going to be alone a lot, right? And that's just reality, right? Most likely. That's the reality for me. I don't have much support. I am in another country. I do not have my family here. I decided to make this genius decision to move to France with my ex-wife, who I haven't been together with for 10 years. So she's not even the person that I'm really talking about, although that was an experience as well. But, yeah, if you have a support system, great. But the reality is, even if you have a support system, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time by yourself, and it's going to suck because you're going to not see your kids that much. You're used to seeing your kids every day. You're used to having the hugs and the laughter and the kisses and the moments and just all those everyday moments. You're not going to have those everyday moments much with them anymore, right? You're going to see them only on the weekends. So you're not going to really see them before and after school much. You're not going to have those special moments with them, those everyday moments. It's going to be more of like, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, occasional nights, and vacation days and whatnot, So it sucks, And if there was another way, I would totally do the other way. But there is no other way. The legal system is basically set up in a way where men are in a very bad situation, where a lot of men are almost forced to live in toxic situations. And a lot of men do. And a lot of men just drink alcohol and accept it and kind of live their life on autopilot, and they're not too conscious about it. And that's a choice. And I lived that for a while, and it wasn't worth it for me. I just needed to make a change. It was ruining me. It was ruining everything. All right. It got to the point where eventually I was just like sleeping in the kids' room, and that was it. Like, I was basically just an afterthought. Not even, I was just like this guy who does grocery shopping and does the family transportation and takes care of, certain things, and then basically just pushed aside and forgotten. I was, and that's just basically like, no, I don't want to be sleeping in the kids' room, because there's always the TV on and alcohol and toxic conversations and toxic content playing in the background. and just toxic relationships. Like that's not, I don't want to be confined to, sleeping in the kids' room on the other side of the house because I can't stand my life because I hate my life. Like, no, that needs to change. And the only option is there seems to not really be the legal structure where you have 50-50 custody. That doesn't happen much. Yeah, there are circumstances where that can happen, but the majority of cases for the majority of men, especially if you're in the type of situation where I am, where you're not in your country, things are tight financially. You're doing your best, but sometimes your best isn't quite good enough. Most likely situation is you're just gonna kind of have to bite the bullet, and it's gonna be a tough bullet to swallow. You're gonna probably spend a good amount of your time contemplating depression and all the things that come with that. That sucks. That's heavy. That's hard. Yeah. But it's necessary for everybody. And I kind of look at it as like the toxic person is not going to change, but you're giving them the opportunity to maybe change for the next person. Maybe they'll learn that from the second, the third, the fourth person that the problem might be them, you know? They probably will never learn anything, but you pulling away, you creating freedom and comfort and security and structure ultimately helps everybody. Ultimately. And that I really believe that, And I didn't want to believe that. I didn't want that to be my solution. I didn't want to live that, right? And it happened to me not once but twice. So I'm living something. It happened with my ex-wife, who I had my son with, my oldest son, and it's happening with my current partner or ex-partner, whatever you want to call it, now with my two other kids, right? And it's rough. Family court is not giving any handouts to men in any way, shape, or form. So, but yeah. All right. So I hope this is helpful for anybody in this type of a situation. I'll be talking about a little bit more about how to handle these type of personalities in other videos in the future. I'm sure. I don't have any hard plans on that, but yeah, it's probably a good thing to talk about. And it's not easy. So good luck. Take care of yourself. Be careful and make healthy choices. Take care.